So the 1970s video format war was really an important phenomenon that happened during this time period. It was important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the fact that this format war impacted home entertainment for the next, 2 or 3 decades. And secondly, it was one of the first times that a format war had really happened in consumer electronics, and so that combined with what a huge thing video recording became was made this very important. So we're going to take a look at two different video cassette systems, the Sony Betamax and the VHS system, and we're going to look at why one of them won over the other and how that ended up happening. So Betamax launched in late 1975 in the US, and it was first to market over VHS. It also had superior video quality to VHS, which Sony used in a lot of its marketing. However, it was quite expensive at over $2,000 at launch, and had a relatively short recording time of 60 minutes. This unit pictured at right is cheaper than 2000. It's 1300 approximately. However, these units were manufactured exclusively by Sony. So VHS, by comparison, launched later, which put it at a disadvantage. It launched in late 1977 in the US. And so when it did launch, though, it had a 2-hour recording time and was which gave it a advantage over Betamax. It was developed by JVC, but they licensed the hardware to many other companies, including RCA, Zenith, Panasonic, Hitachi, and Sharp. And it was also significantly cheaper, with the first VCR retailing at about $850. Oh, that's the wrong direction. And so there were a couple different deciding factors that played into why one won over the other. The first factor that Sony focused a lot on was picture quality. Betamax was said to have better picture quality over its counterparts, and Sony used this a lot to their advantage in the marketing. However, in real life, in the flesh, this was not really noticeable because consumer TVs were not quite, you couldn't quite tell the difference using them. And the average viewer was also not as concerned about image quality, which is something Sony had not really counted on because they had more experience selling recording systems to professionals. Recording time, however, ended up being a significant factor, and so VHS was at an advantage here at launch. They had launched with double the recording time, and there ended up being a sort of mini recording time war where Sony would slow down their tapes so that they could get longer recording times, and VHS did the same, and ultimately they were able to achieve quite long recording times. Based on numerous different things, like increasing the size of the tapes and slowing down how fast they recorded. However, JVC from the start knew that they wanted to focus on recording time, and so they aimed for a 4-hour recording time, which was, in their minds, the average length of an American football game was their target. And finally, the other important factor that Sony had not really counted on was cost. And so Betamax systems, as we saw, were significantly more expensive both at launch and after launch. VHS systems were hundreds of dollars cheaper. And while Sony was the only producer of Betamax, VHS licensed its property to many other companies. And so this meant that VHS was able to cost optimize itself a lot better, and it also played into some brand loyalty aspects, where people who were loyal to a company like RCA specifically could buy VHS players from RCA. And so eventually VCR prices for VHS actually ended up below $300, which, considering that Betamax started at $2,300, is quite a significant, or was quite a significant problem for Sony. And so, ultimately, as you can probably gather from this point, VHS won the format war. And so we can see that in 1987, VHS had 90% of the market share. And in 1988, Betamax was declared dead. Really, this was kind of like the slow death. By 1980, VHS had like 60% of the market share. Um, However, it wasn't until the late 80s that the format war was really, truly over. And so, a couple of the reasons that this is significant today and interesting today is that it was really, the competition really ended up hinging on on a couple facts. Those being specifically that this was unproven technology. Video cassette recording was a new field for consumer electronics. And the two companies really had different ideas of what consumer demands were like. Sony focused a lot more on quality, and their products reflected that, whereas JVC focused more on recording time. They knew that that was important to consumers, and they were also more focused on cost. They made some business decisions that allowed it to be cheaper. And VHS really became the widespread video standard until its replacement by DVDs. It was more or less the go-to format for tape recording. And so that really concludes our presentation. VHS was the clear victor here. And it's really kind of interesting to take a step back and look at why that was.